Okay, picture this. It's late 2024, holiday decorations are twinkling, and suddenly New Jersey residents are reporting these strange swarms of drones in the sky.
Yeah.
Night after night, these unexplained lights, sometimes moving in odd formations, are spotted near homes.
Wow.
Military bases like Picatinny Arsenal, even vital infrastructure.
Right.
It's enough to make anyone wonder what's going on here.
You're right. It was a confusing and unsettling time.
Yeah.
Initially, there was so little information available.
Yeah.
No one seemed to know the drone's origin, who was controlling them, or their purpose.
Right.
It really fueled a lot of public anxiety.
And that initial mystery is what makes these sources we're diving into so captivating. We've got news articles and reports that take us through the whole saga, from those first eerie sightings in November all the way to the Trump administration's explanation in January 2025. What surprised me was how much the story evolved over those few months.
The evolution is definitely fascinating. Early on, people were drawing comparisons to science fiction,
Oh, really?
with theories ranging from covert government operations to, well, extraterrestrial activity.
Okay, let's break down what actually happened.
Yeah.
Our sources lay out a timeline that shows how this story unfolded, and there are some key moments that really ramped up the tension.
Definitely.
What do you think?
Those early reports from November 2024 describing strange formations and drones returning to the same spots night after night really set the stage. What stands out to you from those initial accounts?
What struck me was the sheer number of reports. Over 5,000.
Wow.
Even if only a small percentage were deemed credible enough to investigate, it's still a massive number, and that volume, combined with the lack of clear answers, really fueled speculation. By December, things escalated even further, right?
Absolutely. That's when we started seeing a flurry of sightings over those sensitive locations like military bases and critical infrastructure.
Right.
That shift understandably amplified concerns about potential security threats.
And, of course, you can't ignore the political dimension. Trump, who was president-elect at the time, publicly criticized the Biden administration's response, accusing them of secrecy and implying they knew more than they were letting on. Do you think that political pressure played a role in how the situation was ultimately handled?
It's hard to say for sure, but that political back and forth certainly added another layer of complexity to the story. By mid-December, a joint statement was released from multiple agencies: Homeland Security, the FBI, the FAA, even the Department of Defense. It was an attempt to address the public's growing concerns.
And what did they say? Did they have any concrete explanations for these drone sightings?
They acknowledged the drone activity, but characterized it as a combination of factors.
Okay.
They pointed to lawful commercial drone operations, hobbyists flying drones for recreation, and even law enforcement agencies using drones for surveillance. But they also highlighted something that might surprise you: misidentification.
Misidentification, what do you mean?
They were saying that some of the reported drones were actually manned aircraft, helicopters, even stars. It seems that in this atmosphere of heightened anxiety, people were misinterpreting what they were seeing.
Okay, so we've got authorized drone use and some good old-fashioned human error. But does that really explain the sheer scale of the sightings, especially around those sensitive areas?
That's where things get interesting. In January 2025, after Trump took office, his new press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, made a rather significant statement during her first press briefing.
Okay.
She said, and I quote, "After research and study, the drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and various other reasons."
So the mystery drones were actually part of authorized research projects. That's quite a twist.
But it also raises a lot of questions. What kind of research required so many drones? Why wasn't this information shared sooner?
Those are valid questions.
Oh.
Unfortunately, our sources don't provide specific details about the nature of the research projects.
Okay.
But what they do reveal is how this revelation shifted the entire narrative. It went from this unexplained, potentially threatening phenomenon to something much more mundane, even if still a bit unsettling.
Exactly. And that shift highlights a crucial point: the power of information, or lack thereof, to shape public perception. Imagine if that information about authorized research had been made available earlier.
Yeah.
Could it have prevented some of the fear and speculation? What do you think?
It's hard to say for certain, but greater transparency from the FAA and other agencies might have helped to calm public anxieties and prevent the situation from spiraling.
That raises an important question for you to consider. How do we balance the need for transparency with other considerations such as national security or the protection of proprietary research? It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
It seems like transparency could have been key in managing this whole situation. But even with that explanation about authorized research, the New Jersey drone saga didn't just disappear, right?
Right.
There were some real-world consequences.
You're absolutely right. Leavitt's statement did reframe the incident. Yeah. But it didn't erase the concerns or the actions taken in response to those initial sightings. One significant outcome was the imposition of temporary flight restrictions by the FAA.
Ah, yes, those flight restrictions. They weren't exactly blanket bans across the entire state, were they?
No, they were targeted. Our sources indicate that these restrictions were primarily focused on areas deemed sensitive, such as Bedminster, where Trump's golf club is located, and military installations like Picatinny Arsenal.
That makes sense. Even with confirmation that many of the drones were part of authorized activities, it's understandable that authorities would err on the side of caution, especially around those high-profile locations. It speaks to the difficult balancing act they faced in this situation.
Precisely. They had to consider public safety and security while also trying to avoid unnecessarily disrupting legitimate drone operations.
Right.
And those restrictions, though temporary, weren't insignificant. One source mentions a month-long drone ban over parts of New Jersey and New York.
That's a substantial disruption. Did those restrictions impact any specific industries or activities?
It's safe to assume that the restrictions likely affected various sectors, including commercial drone deliveries, aerial photography, and potentially even some research projects. This incident really underscored how integrated drones are becoming in our daily lives, and how even temporary restrictions can have a ripple effect.
And beyond those tangible disruptions, there's also the question of public perception. Did this whole saga change how people view drones?
I think it definitely played a role in shaping the ongoing conversation about drones. Imagine yourself back then reading those news reports, hearing the speculation, maybe even seeing those unexplained lights yourself. It wouldn't be surprising to feel a sense of unease.
Our sources mentioned some lawmakers calling for military intervention, which shows just how seriously people were taking this situation. While that level of response might seem extreme now, it speaks to the level of anxiety at the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And while the eventual explanation provided some clarity, it also highlighted a gap in public understanding of drone technology. People were understandably asking questions. What kind of research warrants this level of drone activity? Why wasn't this information more readily available from the start?
It almost feels like a trust deficit emerged between the public and those responsible for overseeing drone activities. What could have been done differently to address that?
That's a great question. I think proactive communication from agencies like the FAA could have played a crucial role. Imagine if clear, concise information about the authorized research projects had been released early on.
While transparency is crucial, wouldn't revealing too much about specific research activities potentially compromise national security or intellectual property?
That's a valid concern. Striking the right balance between transparency and other legitimate considerations is key. But even without disclosing sensitive details, agencies could still provide general information about the types of research being conducted, the safety protocols in place, and the regulatory framework governing drone operations.
It seems like building that trust and understanding requires more than just reactive statements after an incident has already sparked fear. It's about proactively engaging with the public, demystifying the technology, and addressing concerns head-on.
Exactly. Public education is essential. Increasing awareness about drone technology, its applications, and the regulations surrounding it could help people make more informed judgments and feel less apprehensive about these machines.
Our sources also mentioned the lasting political fallout from this incident, with Trump continuing to criticize the previous administration's handling of the situation even after taking office.
It became a political football, which unfortunately often happens when new and somewhat controversial technologies enter the public sphere.
But focusing on political point scoring distracts from the real issues, right? The core focus should be on the technology itself, its implications, and the need for smart, effective regulation.
I agree. We need to approach these matters from a place of informed, reasoned discussion, not partisan bickering. Otherwise, it's the public that ultimately loses out.
So where do we go from here? Drones aren't going away. If anything, their presence in our lives is only going to grow. This New Jersey drone saga, as unsettling as it was, may have been a necessary wake-up call.
It's like we got a preview of a future where drones are commonplace, a future that presents both incredible opportunities and potential challenges. What are your thoughts on that?
It makes me think that this incident forced us to confront the complexities of drones, to acknowledge the need for a balanced approach to their integration into society. It exposed vulnerabilities in our systems, both in terms of regulations and communication, but it also showcased the incredible potential of this technology.
Well said. And as drones become more prevalent, those vulnerabilities could be exploited for more nefarious purposes. That's a sobering thought.
It certainly is, and it raises the question, have we as a society truly learned from the New Jersey drone sightings of 2024? Are we prepared for the more complex drone-related scenarios that lie ahead?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that deserves careful consideration. Perhaps this deep dive has sparked some thoughts for you, the listener, about how we can navigate this rapidly evolving technological landscape.
So we started with these mysterious drone swarms and ended up with, well, authorized research. But we also saw a lot of public concern, a bit of political back and forth, and even some stargazing thrown in for good measure. It's definitely been quite a journey. As we wrap up our deep dive into this New Jersey drone saga, I'm wondering, what's the lasting impact? What should we all be taking away from this?
Well, one crucial takeaway is the importance of communication, proactive communication, and education. Like if those initial reports of drone sightings, if they'd been met with clear, concise information about the authorized research that was happening, it might have helped to mitigate some of that early fear and speculation.
So you're saying agencies like the FAA could have taken a more proactive approach to kind of inform the public about what was going on? Wouldn't that risk, though, potentially compromise sensitive research or national security?
You're right. That's a valid point. And striking that balance is really important. I'm not saying that every detail of ongoing research should be, revealed, but providing some general information about the types of research being conducted, the safety protocols that are in place, and even the regulatory framework that governs drone operations could go a long way in fostering public understanding and trust.
It's about, like you said before, demystifying the technology.
Right.
The more people understand about drones, about their applications and the rules surrounding them, the less likely they are to jump to those, far out conclusions or feel threatened. Education is really key here.
Absolutely. Think about it this way. If you suddenly saw a group of people in hazmat suits in your neighborhood, you'd probably be concerned, right?
Yeah.
But if you knew they were there to do routine environmental testing, you'd feel a lot less alarmed.
Right.
Same with drones. Knowledge can really help to alleviate that fear.
That's a good analogy. And it highlights another important takeaway from all of this, the need to avoid unnecessary politicization of these types of issues. As we saw, the drone sightings became a political football pretty quickly with, accusations and counter-accusations being thrown around.
And when that happens, when these conversations get overly politicized, it just makes it so much harder to focus on the real issues, like the technology itself, the potential benefits, the risks, the need for thoughtful and evidence-based regulations.
We need to move away from this partisan bickering and toward a more constructive dialogue, one that puts public safety and responsible innovation first.
Exactly. And that dialogue needs to involve all of the stakeholders, government agencies, industry experts, researchers, and of course the public. Everyone has a role to play when it comes to shaping the future of drone technology.
So where do we go from here? Drones aren't going anywhere. If anything, they're becoming more and more integrated into our lives.
That's right. And as this technology continues to evolve, we can definitely expect even more complex scenarios to come up. The New Jersey drone saga, as unsettling as it was at the time, might have been a really valuable learning experience, a peek into what the future holds, with all of its challenges and opportunities.
It's almost like we were given this sneak peek at a future where drones are just commonplace, a future that deserves our attention and a lot of careful consideration.
Exactly. And it brings us to a final thought-provoking question for you, the listener. Imagine you are a policymaker tasked with making new drone regulations. What are the most critical factors you would consider? How would you balance the need for safety, privacy, and innovation? It's a complex challenge and one that's going to shape how we all interact with this transformative technology for years to come. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.